Coming up on Tech News today, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission wants you to reclaim your name. Did you know you lost it? Also, Apple giving a better deal to the record companies than Pandora. And did Sony undercut the Xbox price by getting rid of the camera? All that and more coming up.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Thursday, June 27th, 2013. Tech News Today is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create a professional website, blog, portfolio, or online store. For a free trial and 10% off your first purchase on new accounts, go to squarespace.com and use offer code TNT6. Welcome to Tech News Today. I'm Tom Merritt.
I'm Sarah Lane.
I'm Maya Zakhtar.
And I'm Jason Howell.
And this is the show where we keep you up to date on the most important stories in the tech world, try to put them in some context, and we start by telling you the top 10 stories of the day in the news feuds. Microsoft Build still going on. Microsoft announced the new Internet Explorer 11 in a blog post. The emphasis was on touch capabilities to make IE 11 work better on tablets. Browser also fully supports HTML5 and can sync tabs through SkyDrive. Browser is only available in the Windows 8.1 Preview Edition right now. It will come to all Windows users who upgrade to 8.1 when that becomes official. And Microsoft said it will also bring Internet Explorer to Windows 7 users, but it didn't say when.
Hey, when you go to space, how are you going to pay for that tang anyway? PayPal hopes it's with PayPal Galactic, which is not an April Fool's joke. It's a new initiative to own universal payments and commerce in outer space. The company is bringing people from the scientific community, they say, like those from the SETI Institute and Space Tourism Society, to prepare and support the future of space commerce and develop the galaxy's first money transfer platform.
That's a real story.
Yeah.
Verizon is celebrating a milestone as it turns on its 500th LTE market. Where is that lucky market? Well, it's Parkersburg, West Virginia. That's great, but what about voice over LTE? Verizon Chief Network Officer Nicola Palmer said that won't launch until next year, 2014.
The U.S. Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, the secret court in charge of spying in the United States, allowed a legal filing by Microsoft to be made public Wednesday. The filing was submitted June 19th, a day after a similar filing by Google, and requests permission to report publicly aggregated numbers about FISA requests for data separate from other local, state, and federal law enforcement requests. Both companies wish to combat the belief that they allow direct access to their servers to the NSA.
Apple's a loser. Well, specifically, the company lost a bid in a lawsuit to add Samsung Electronics Galaxy S4 smartphones to a list of products it alleges to infringe on Apple patents. The decision yesterday by a U.S. magistrate judge is part of a second patent case in San Jose, California, between the two companies covering technology in their smartphones, including the iPhone 5 and the Galaxy S3. So burn on you, Apple.
Ow.
It's here. Dig Reader has launched an iOS with iPhone and iPad apps. If you're looking for the app itself, it's actually an update to the Dig iOS app, so go get the Dig app. According to Dig, you'll be able to import your Google Reader feeds seamlessly. Remember, Google Reader drops dead on July 1st.
Won't be so seamless after that. Julie Brill, a commissioner with the U.S. FTC, Federal Trade Commission, gave a speech to Computers, Freedom, and Privacy Conference members Wednesday, suggesting modernization of the Fair Credit Reporting Act in the U.S. in light of big data. She also recommended that the big data industry members start a one-stop shop on their own, don't wait for the legislation, and called it Reclaim Your Name. Brill proposes data brokers let people know what data is being collected about them, make it possible to correct errors, and opt out of marketing campaigns.
According to a copy of a document obtained by Billboard, Apple will not have to pay for any indie label content during the beta launch of its upcoming iTunes radio service, which can last up to 120 days. There are a lot of other details emerging, too. The service will allow listeners up to 6 song skips per hour. If they do in the first 20 seconds of the song, Apple doesn't have to pay for those songs. Apple also doesn't have to pay for song skips and some songs that are on the same albums as albums that you already own, even if they're only partial.
Got it. 9 to 5 Mac reports an anonymous tipster found the beta version of iOS 7 allows users to control the phone with left or right head movements. A setting in the accessibility section turns on the ability to recognize your head movements and associate them with things like cycling through options on screen, acting as your home button, starting Siri, open notification center, controlling your volume, or switching apps. So over to you, Ayaz.
It'll be great for confused dogs, Tom. Like, huh. So Samsung has announced its 55-inch curved OLED TV is now available in Korea for the price of 15 million Korean won. That's about 13,000 US dollars. For features, the TV gives you 3D video and comes with Samsung's Evolution Kit. That's the CPU of the TV that's upgradable. The TV won't be available outside of Korea until next month.
This episode of Tech News Today brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create a professional website, blog, portfolio, or online store. Make sure you get the most of their recent innovations. Squarespace has a 24/7 support team. So when they change something and you're like, wait a minute, how does this work? Live chat during the week, extremely fast email support throughout the day and night, plus plans start as low as $8 a month for software and hosting. And this is fast and easy to use. Everything's drag and drop. Their page builder tool, they call it Layout Engine, lets you customize pages in just a couple seconds. You add blocks of content. I do this all the time. We add videos to the Sword and Laser page. I just add a block with a video. Boom, it shows up. Gives me a nice screenshot. You can add text that way, social media content, and you preview the layout as you go. You see where it's going to be in your page. Just a few clicks in their style editor tool allows you to select your font, change your colors, customize those templates so they look great. They're still award-winning designs, but they're uniquely yours. Squarespace connects all your social media accounts, gives you the best mobile experience so your site looks right on any screen size, and powerful and flexible e-commerce solution. If you're doing a store, you have to check out Squarespace. For a free trial, go to squarespace.com, sign up for a free account, no credit card needed, just try it out, start building your website. Then if you decide to purchase it, use offer code TNT6 and get 10% off your first purchase on new accounts. That includes monthly and annual plans. And don't forget, free domain registration for annual plans subscriptions, plus that 10% off. That's squarespace.com. Use that offer code TNT6. Everything you need to create an exceptional website. And we thank Squarespace for their support of Tech News Today. Also want to thank Steve Kovac for coming back on the show, senior tech editor at Business Insider, joining us today. Welcome, Steve.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. Very glad to have you back. And we got lots of good stuff to talk about, starting with IE11. So we mentioned it's optimized for touch screens. Some of those things are swiping for back and forward now. When you're in a web page, they have this this stick to your finger thing. So when you move around the page, it'll just follow your finger, just like on other apps and things that have done this before. But it's in the browser. It's pretty nice. Hover menu support. They also, you can now open more than 10 tabs in IE. 100 tabs per window, they say, won't affect your battery life, which is pretty amazing. And they say you can do unlimited tabs if you want. And they'll tab sync through SkyDrive, fully supporting HTML5. They're shifting some of the rendering to the GPU as well for things like JPEGs to kind of free up the CPU, makes the drive work a little snappier. And some other things like you could always pin your bookmarks in IE to this new start screen, but now you can make it a live tile or a widget as well. This, like as I mentioned, coming in Windows 8.1. Steve Kovac, I don't know, do you use Windows a lot?
We just lost him.
Oh, okay.
You scared him with that Windows question.
Steve, do you use Skype? No, not anymore. Well, okay. As I know, you're an occasional Windows user.
Occasional, as in like every other day.
I would even say. What do you think of this? Do you like these innovations? Some criticisms have been that they're just catching up with other browsers.
I think it's integral for Microsoft to have these touch features in IE 11 because Microsoft has gone all in with the touch interface with Windows 8 and 8.1. They modified it a bit so it's more cohesive, but if they don't have touch-based controls and controls that are familiar to those who use tablets on its web browser, they're really, really screwed. So by having this, it's kind of like they're just catching up with the rest of Microsoft, not necessarily even the rest of the browsers out there with 100 tabs per window. This idea that it doesn't kill battery life, though, that's nice to believe. But then again, Microsoft should be able to do that considering they know how the operating system works.
It's also sort of just a weird example, right? It's like, okay, I get it that the point is it's not, the browser itself isn't going to make such a dent on battery life, but 100 tabs should never be open at once. That's insanity.
Are you kidding me? I want that. I probably should know.
100?
Well, 100 is
100.
plenty, but I will open sometimes well north of 30 tabs at a time.
But yeah.
And then my fan is just like.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess that's true.
Yeah. So I mean, if that works, I'm into that. And they're not saying they aren't going to kill the battery. They're just trying to improve battery life. I don't know how we're going to benchmark that. I guess you can use SunSpider, they say, to measure the performance. Maybe that can help be combined with some things.
I'm interested to know who would be like, wow, IE is finally something I want to come back to. Because, I mean, there are a lot of people who used IE at one point that don't anymore. I'm one of those people. It's just been so long. It's like, I don't know. I mean, it still isn't doing anything so special that I'd be like, yeah, I'm done with Chrome. I'm going to try IE again.
I doubt that it would win people over so much as that it won't cause people to switch.
Yeah.
If it has these features with 8.1 and you get a device that's 8.1, you won't have a reason to go over to Chrome or go over to Firefox or Opera even. If it's good enough for the basic usage and what you're used to with your mobile phones and your other devices, that'll be good enough. So I doubt it'll like bring people back so much as it will stop people from leaving it in the first place.
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, Internet Explorer is the browser that comes with Windows. And in fact, the basis for many an antitrust allegation. You would think that Microsoft should still be dominating as much as Microsoft Windows is still dominating on the desktop, which is why this is an important story, because it's still a dominant browser out there because of that, but it doesn't dominate nearly as much as it used to. And part of that is that it became a bad browser for a while. It's on its way back. Although when I use a Windows tablet, the first thing I do, if it's not RT, is install another browser because I don't want to have to use IE. And I hate this broken way, and they didn't fix this, where if you're in the tile view, you actually see a different IE than when you're in the desktop view. That is freaking confusing, even for somebody who knows it's happening.
It's perfect for Microsoft. In a way, it's at least consistent with the confusion that is everything Microsoft.
That'll become seamless eventually. And here Steve is back.
He's in a wind tunnel.
So yeah, Steve, what do you make of IE 11?
You guys are kind of breaking up a little bit, but I think you asked what I think about IE 11. My biggest gripe is, and I've been testing 8.1 and 11 for the last day or so, and again, I hate having to switch back between the desktop version of the browser and this touch browser. It's a wildly different experience. And if we're supposed to be living in two different worlds in Windows 8, at least they can make these apps a little bit more consistent across the two different desktop environments. And that's what I'm really looking for them just to kill that old desktop version of the browser.
Yeah, I was just saying the same thing. I don't understand that. And this was a chance to fix that. Maybe they'll fix it down the road, though. But yeah, some of these improvements aren't revolutionary necessarily, but they're improvements that IE needed to make, and they're improvements that I will welcome when I use it on a tablet, especially if it I didn't hear if it's coming to Windows RT, and if so, when, because I would like to see this on my Microsoft service. Let's talk about Apple and radio. We've been talked about the Pandora Pink Floyd briefly in the news fuse the other day. Those two are at each other debating how much artists get paid for songs. But now the terms of Apple's radio licensing for iTunes has come out, Sarah.
Yeah, so in iTunes Radio's first year, Apple will pay a label. It's just slightly different for indie labels versus sort of the big guys, the Sonys and the Warner Music, but somewhat the same. Label about 13 cents each time a song is played. Also, the label will get 15% of net advertising revenue. Of course, Apple's going to be using their iAds platform. And it'll be proportionate to a label's share of the music played on iTunes. So bigger label, you kind of get more out of it. In the second year, the rate bumps up to 14 cents per listen and 19% of ad revenue. Well, you say, I don't know, is that a lot? Is that a little? Well, it's more than what Pandora pays out. Pandora currently pays 12 cents to the labels per listen on its service. Apple's offering music publishers more than twice as much in royalties than Pandora does. Now, some of you may have read Tim Westergren actually put up a blog post last night basically saying the RIAA is just flat out lying about some of what Pandora is out to do. He says there's some rumor that Pandora wants to reduce artist royalties by 85%. He says that's not true. Please find where we ever said that. It's just not true. And this is the RIAA basically, a smear campaign against Pandora. But when you look at something like, well, Pandora is a real thing. iTunes Radio is about to be a real thing. iTunes Radio has better rates, at least on paper so far. What happens to Pandora if Apple's just going to provide better a return on investment for music labels? Anybody? Steve?
Well, I think what's really interesting, and I've been testing the iOS 7 beta for the past couple of weeks now, and when you listen to iTunes Radio, there's a big fat button at the very top when you're listening to a song that says "Buy this song." And that's going to be really exciting to labels, I think, because that's another revenue generator for them. People are going to start have more incentive or to buy new music and discover new music within iTunes, where people already buy all their music. Pandora sort of has that, but not in this as seamlessly as what's going to be in iOS 7. So Pandora should be scared, I feel like, especially once iOS 7 is and iTunes Radio is out to everybody.
Do you really think that many people are going to become music buyers? The thing is with these sorts of services, and I listen to a lot of music online, it has basically stopped my music buying because I'm like, I don't need anything in my hard drive anymore. I just, my Pandora station is so great for when I'm in the mood for indie music versus hip hop or something like that. iRadio hopefully will act the same way. And it'll be interesting to see how many people actually still do buy stuff in the iTunes Music Store.
I think iTunes
there is a huge button on the top, so it's going to be hard to ignore that, I feel like, for a lot of people.
Steve, is that linked to your actual iTunes account? Because with Pandora, you have to click a button for buy, then you pick from 3 options, and then you have to click again to buy. This idea that iTunes has this one-button solution of like, hey, I listened to the song enough times.
Right,
I'm
and you're
of
already
these
logged
ads.
in.
Yeah, it's already right there. So you just click this one button, and you're going to pick up Blurred Lines today because you've heard it a billion times. And you don't want to hear any more ads. And there goes Tom with Blurred Lines, I assume. But I think that Pandora's rates are going to go up. These guys are going to go with the record industry is going to play hardball, saying, "Look, Apple's paying us a ton of money. You have to pay us a lot of money. You have to give us some advertising revenue. You got to do this." And Pandora is trying with their workaround by buying a terrestrial radio station, which BMI sued them over. So let's see how that goes.
I think Sarah's right, though. I think old farts like me still buy music, but the trend is to just rent it, to just pay the subscription. And it's funny to me that Tim Westergren has been leading the charge on this. He's been well ahead of this trend, saying, let's figure out how to make money for everyone on this. At least that's what he's saying. And the music industry seems to always hate the people they strike the first deal with, right? So Pandora is the first big successful I don't buy the music, I rent it situation. And at every turn, it seems like the music industry is fighting him. But here they go, and they strike a deal with iTunes, which sure, it's a little bit more money, but it's not that much more money. And iTunes was the company they were trying to shut out after Apple became the first big successful music store. Remember, they were fighting against Apple and not wanting to give them all the music and trying to foster competition. I get that they're just trying to foster competition, but it seems like the music industry should at least try to meet Westergren halfway on this problem of royalties, because maybe he's exaggerating it, but I don't believe he is when he says that Pandora is just kind of barely getting by.
Yeah, he also makes a really good point about, how do you monetize, how do you put a monetary value on someone hearing a song on Pandora? He says, if it's a terrestrial radio station and that station plays a song, I don't know, maybe 1 million people might be tuned in and hear that song at the same time. On Pandora, it's so much less because it's a personal thing. I mean, I'm the only person who's listening to my station, probably. So one person heard that track, not 1 million people potentially. So, it's something that you have to quantify.
All right, let's quantify how Sony came up with the price of the PlayStation 4. There's been a lot of speculation of why it was $100 less than the Xbox. Ayaz, what do we know?
Yeah, IGN has a story saying how Sony was able to undercut Microsoft with that $100 difference between it and the PS4, Xbox and the PS4. According to IGN sources, Sony was going to include a PS4 camera with every console, but in the months leading up to E3, Sony killed the idea to keep the cost at $399 instead of $499. That way, Microsoft wouldn't catch wind that they were going to do this lower price thing. IGN says the move has damned the camera as an accessory and it's going to lead to fragmentation because you have to have a great game that uses that camera to buy the camera, if you think of it that way. It also says that the built-in LED move trackers that are in the DualShock 4 controllers, they're pretty much useless because that was going to be tracked by the cameras, and the camera is now an optional $60 accessory. Steve, looking at the story, did Sony do itself a disservice by not including the camera and undercutting the Xbox this way?
No, because I think the PlayStation story in the last few months has been, we're a traditional gaming console. We're going for our core hardcore gamer audience. And that audience doesn't want to dance around to play games necessarily. They want to, just jump into Call of Duty and start playing. Whereas, the Kinect games, you're dancing around your living room and so forth, and that adds to the price of the console. I don't think the PS4 audience is going to care that much that they're not getting this motion control necessarily, unless there's some super awesome game coming down the road that we haven't heard of yet that it becomes a necessary tool for.
But doesn't that create this world of not having these games that would take advantage of the camera that would be there? Like the Xbox will always have the Kinect because it comes with every one. Isn't that going to make the PS4 games a lot less fun?
But I don't think so. I mean, do you really need to dance around to play Call of Duty or these cool the Destiny game coming up and all that kind of stuff? Those are more family fun games, I guess. I mean, and plus we don't even know 100% what that camera can do. Whereas the Kinect, we got this awesome demo and we know, it can monitor your heart rate and so forth. I think the PS4 and Xbox audiences are just going to be way different demographics than people who actually try to buy this. And I have this feeling that the people who go for the PS4 won't necessarily miss it. And plus there's that psychological, okay, I'm getting the same games, the ability to play most of the same games for $100 cheaper on the PS4. I think that's going to help a lot too.
And we're still waiting for the game that makes everybody say, oh yeah, I need a camera. I need a Kinect. I need a motion controller.
Obviously, you haven't played Dance Central.
I actually have played Dance Central.
And you
I
still don't think that that's perfect?
We're waiting for the perfect. Well, okay. No, it's actually a very good use of it, but it hasn't captured the imagination the way Wii Sports did with the Nintendo Wii, right? So when that comes, then Sony may have a bigger problem. But down the road, they could say, hey, we saved you $100 a long time ago. Now we're going to bundle in our motion control with this amazing new game. It'll cost you a little more. But I think I agree with Steve. This is a very smart move for Sony because competing on price gets them ahead of Microsoft out of the gate. And that is going to make a big difference. And it's essential for Sony because they're coming from behind, remember.
I don't know. I think it's just this difference of the games that will be built around the camera for Kinect, because that's going to be in every single Xbox One. I think that a lot of developers are going to take advantage of that. This idea that multiple people are in the room, or if you're going to this idea, Steve, I think you were making a joke of this idea of Call of Duty. Why would you need a camera on you? But maybe people want to walk around or move their head instead of like trying to move the controller. So I'm thinking maybe there could be some development that would be done with the camera as opposed to not having one on the PS4. So it might be missing features for certain games because effectively these consoles are the same box. They're running the same architecture. They're running the same everything. If the only difference is a camera and the developers take advantage of it, that could be something unique to the Xbox that PlayStation might lose out on.
Again, I still think down the road, maybe Sony comes back with a bundle or something. It's not like they don't have a camera connector or developers can't develop something for the camera. But the short-term success, we haven't seen one of those yet. FTC wants to let internet users see their data. We mentioned this in the news. Fuse Reclaim Your Name, and a big speech to update the Fair Credit Reporting Act, give customers access to info that data brokers have on you. Did you know, I learned this by reading Ms. Brill's speech. Did you know that a company called Axiom, A-C-X-I-O-M, just allowed you to start looking at what it knows about you? Do you even know what Axiom is? Because I didn't until I went and looked it up on the internet. I still couldn't find where I'm supposed to be able to get access to my data from them, but apparently Julie Brill says they've done this. She's the commissioner for the Federal Trade Commission in the U.S., speaking at that conference, saying we want to require data brokers to provide notice, access, and correction rights to consumers scaled to the sensitivity and use of the data at issue. So, in other words, if it's a very light use of data, then we're not going to put a big burden on business. But if they're collecting data on you that will determine whether you get a job, what school you go to, things like that, you have the right, you should have the right to look at that data. And people are increasingly using big data for that kind of situation. Now, she mentioned credit reporting, the Fair Credit Reporting Act from the 70s, as the precedent for this. How well did that work? How useful do you think this will end up being, whether it's a voluntary scheme or some kind of legislation? Steve, what do you think?
I think it's going to be a lot to ask for private companies to just voluntarily do this without some kind of really specific legislation, especially because there's a lot of infrastructure that I'm sure and costs that would go into creating such a system where you can essentially look yourself up and figure out what kind of data people have on you. On the other hand, you got to keep in mind a lot of this data are data that you've given up yourself voluntarily. And yes, there's a lot of fine print and so forth. But I really think at the end of the day, there is going to have to be, and this is years down the line, by the way, not tomorrow, where governments are going to have to step in, and there will have to be some kind of specific legislation that dictates what kind of data people have to disclose when they collect it on you.
And I think what Julie Brill's saying is we don't have to wait for the legislation. She's supporting both. And I think what she's trying to encourage the industry to do is, like, if you want to make sure the legislation works for you, start working on it now. Start making your own voluntary standards. Even if you don't get it fully off the ground before the legislation, it'll inform the legislation. Again, I want this. I absolutely want this. I think that we're headed towards a world where people are going to just know a lot more about us than they ever have before. It's just a fact. And I want to have control. That's always what it is. I want to have control over that data.
There's a control or illusion of control. We see terms of service and EULAs all the time. There's lots of data that people just go ahead and go, next. Okay, I read this. I agree. I haven't read a dang thing. If these reports are out there, are people going to read them? It's good that they exist. But will people, because it's available for everyone, will they just go, oh, that's available, it's public, I'm not going to bother to look at it?
Well, that's up to them, but they should certainly have the option to be able to. If they don't feel like it, well, whatever. That's, an individual's prerogative. But it should be freely available should you say, I want to know exactly what data is out there, especially when it, relates to something that could affect you negatively in the future, like getting a job or getting a home loan or that sort of thing.
I think you make a good point, Ayaz. It's not so much that it's an illusion, because I think they could offer real control over this. It's how many people will take advantage of it. How many people do that already with credit reporting, where you can get a free copy of your credit report and file corrections. It's not easy to do, though. It's confusing, and there's all these services that say they're free credit reports, but then they just want to get your information and start marketing things to you. So how do you do this in a way that's simple enough that more people will take advantage of it? That's what I want to know.
Simple and legislation, they usually don't go together, do they? Like, you need like a service like TLDR. Somebody mentioned Psych 4 in the chat room. This idea of having this data. Like, I remember I was renting a car, and I stood there and read the terms, and they looked at me like I was crazy because I was slowing down the line. But I also wanted to know what I was signing up for. But it was an unusual situation. So we'll see how this actually works out in real life.
All right, let's move along to PayPal in space.
Yes,
Sarah.
I've been waiting patiently for this moment. So yeah, we talked a little bit about this in the news fuse. This is a real thing. PayPal Galactic kind of sounds like, are they kidding? But no, PayPal says, listen, there are people, commercial space travel is a real thing. It's only going to continue. There are people currently, astronauts in space, who might want to, I don't know, buy an ebook or something. There are things that actually need to be figured out as far as a unified currency system. So PayPal is working with people who understand space travel, folks from the SETI Institute, Space Tourism Society, and they say what we want to do is create a money transfer platform that would apply to the galaxy. So whether you're on Earth in some sort of a country or you're not on Earth at all, we should at least have a way to be able to transfer money that everybody agrees on, some sort of a unified standard. So the idea now is, what does standard currency look like in a interplanetary society where you're not using cash? What are banking, risk, and fraud management systems going to look like? And PayPal says, listen, we need this already. This is something that you might say like, haha, yeah, when we all live on Mars, this is probably something that, PayPal is going to own. Maybe they've jumped the gun. PayPal says astronauts are inhabiting space stations right now. So, think of them as just the first people where the standard is going to be modeled after. Do we all think that this is a good? I mean, is PayPal just sort of like, first, So when this actually is a need, we can say that we started it back in 2013?
I'm stopping myself from laughing throughout the whole story because it just sounds ridiculous. But then again, things like Virgin Galactic exist and people want to do space tourism. Somebody has to cover this. And PayPal's thinking, all right, there's this mobile payments game that's going on with Square and us. Why don't we go into space? Nobody owns space. We'll own space. It's something that has to be done, but it just screams of crazy. But I guess this is a business model that's going to work. I don't think it's going to be a huge revenue generator by any means for a while, but if they're first, they're first.
I guess, I mean, it keeps the...
I got this email in my inbox today, and I had to read it twice to make sure it wasn't some sort of joke and make sure I was actually getting an email from PayPal announcing this thing. And keep in mind, Buzz Aldrin, an hour ago, he just got up with PayPal, and he's the celebrity spokesperson. He's the second man to walk on the moon, and now he's endorsing this PayPal thing. But then you got to think, how many people are in space right now at any given time? Like a dozen at the most. It's a stunt. It's just to generate some buzz. That's the only way I can see it right now.
Yeah, it's. I think it's first. I think it's a legit thing. We need to know, like, if we're going to be on a Virgin Galactic flight, which is going to happen in the next couple of years, how do we pay for things? But I also don't think it's this big, like, moon landing impulse. I mean, they could take a Square card reader and an iPhone up there and store the numbers and then reconnect when they got down. Like the solutions don't have to be that complex necessarily. So I think it is a little bit of headline grabbing on PayPal's part.
Hey, but if you're paying for commercial spaceflight and you really want to hear that song and you really want to connect to the iTunes iRadio store while you're up there, you're going to need to figure out what currency to use. And PayPal is on it.
But no, that's the thing, right? It's more about internet connectivity. I'm like, I want to be able to actually download the song. How am I going to get internet up there? Yeah. What currency I use? I assume I'm just going to be using a credit card, and it just, translates into whatever currency the folks running the system prefer to use, whether it's dollars or pounds or euros or yen or whatever. Like that doesn't seem like a big problem. It's just PayPal's chance to go, look, we got Buzz Aldrin in space.
Google missed a huge boat here. I mean, or a ship, I guess. They have Google Wallet. They have moonshots. What the heck? They could have done this. They got balloons in space, or at least in stratosphere. Why not get on this? Now PayPal is eating their lunch. It's too bad for Google.
Yep.
Dude, your lunch is gone. Sorry, Google.
Yeah, it's
Meanwhile,
it's free lunch.
Twitter working on something that I have wanted to happen for a long time, the ability to replay the live tweets when you're watching something that was live later.
Yeah, Twitter CEO Dick Costolo spoke at the Brookings Institute on Wednesday and said the company is actually actively testing out a way for users to replay certain events. So it'd be like, let's say you're watching the Oscars on the DVR, you'd be able to see all the tweets that happened during that time. He said, quote, "It would be nice to see like a graphic of spikes in the conversation and what time that happened, to be able to scroll back to that time and see what happened at that particular moment," end quote. Steve, do you think there's any value in a Twitter replay? Is this something you would want to do if you're watching like a game on a DVR or an event?
I would, because I'm a huge Twitter user, and it often sucks me into TV shows I normally wouldn't want to watch. I watched the Tonys this year for some reason, just because people were tweeting about it. But as far as shows that I watch on a time shift thing, I would have loved to have this when I watched the Game of Thrones Red Wedding episode to see what my friends were saying in real time, so I could have followed along sort of with them. That would have been amazing. Unfortunately, I missed out on that. But yeah, I think this is cool. Twitter takes TV very seriously. They bought that Bluefin Labs company for $50 million earlier this year. It's a big thing for them, and they're just playing around and seeing how people interact while they're watching shows, and it really brings back that sense of community that we used to have in the 50s where everyone had to watch a show at the same time with your family. You can kind of get that experience back now with friends all over the world. I like it.
I watched one of the presidential debates on like a half-hour delay because I had been out doing something and I wanted to watch it from the beginning. And what I did is I took Twitter and I went back 30 minutes and just kind of followed it. But the problem was I couldn't interact at that point. So I wonder if Twitter could solve that part of this, which is you could interact with other people who happen to be watching it at the same time. I mean, there's enough people in the world. If it's a popular enough event, you might catch somebody who's watching it at the same time as you. I don't know. But
it's like Twitter appointment viewing. Where it's like, some of us shall agree to watch the next morning at 10. Let's interact. Because that's part of the problem, Tom. I agree. Steve mentions the red wedding. It's like you have all there was like the video compilation of a bunch of reactions, right? And so it's like you can watch that after the fact. But it's kind of the same thing as Twitter, but the fun of Twitter is the interaction. You're not really just passively watching a stream, or I'm not anyway, when it's a sporting event or something like, an election debate or a really popular show. It's part, jokey and updates and OMGs and that sounds really, really stupid, but that's pretty much sums up my Twitter experience. But you do want to interact, and how would that happen after it's live? It's not live anymore.
Well, does it matter that you're replying somebody's comments sometime later, or do you want to be a part of that stream that people see?
The person doesn't want you replying them the next day. It's like you've had those people reply where you're like, dude, that's way late. That was
then you click the little button, you see the conversation. That's how it shows up. Because
Sure.
I've had people reply me about things I've said like a month ago, and I'm like, what are you talking about?
But especially if it's something that's timely, like a live event, a day later, you're going to forget where your head was at that point.
I don't know my Twitter kit, whatever it's called, etiquette for Twitter.
Twitter kit?
I don't know what it is.
I like that.
I'm like replying people like, a week after, so I should watch more social shows.
I understand that replying works so that you're like, oh, okay, this was the tweet that you are replying to. I just think in general, if it's not in real time, the conversation doesn't really have anywhere to go. It's over. The event has ended.
It's over. Let it go. Okay. So the replay is great just for passive viewing.
Well, I would like to see how they implement it. I think it's a great idea, but it's obviously complicated.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what they come up with if this does come out. And Steve brought up a great point with Bluefin Labs that they've got some talent working on this. So I think it'll be different than just my, because if it's all it is like, oh, we'll just rewind to the time when that thing happened and play it out for you. I could do that on my own. It has to give me something extra there that I couldn't do on my own. I think that'd be cool. Let's move on to the randomizer. British Airways teaming up with a company called DesignWorks for electronic bag tags. Now, these aren't the ones that you make yourself. When they tag your bag that you check in at an airport with the destination and everything, remember, you always have to pull that thing off later or deal with a bunch of them accumulating on your bag, or sometimes they'll pull them off. Well, the bag tag would take care of that because you would take your boarding pass from your phone and beam it to the tag, which has an e-ink display that would then show the destination on it and a barcode, just like the paper one, but you could just leave it on. I mean, obviously, you have to be flying British Airways at this point, but if all the airlines eventually started doing this, you'd only have to have the one tag. Nothing could possibly go wrong with this, right, Steve?
I'm sorry, you just dropped out on me. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to pass.
That's okay. I said that nothing could possibly go wrong, right as you, right as you dropped out.
Right as I blipped in, I totally missed everything you just said. I'm sorry.
So it's the bag tag from British Airways that is an e-ink display, replaces the paper tag. Good thing?
Oh, you know what? I think that's okay because, well, first of all, I've had my luggage lost before, and if it does anything to increase or decrease the likelihood of that happening, I'm all for it. The only problem is the extra cost. Like, who's paying for that, and are they gonna give that to other customers automatically? That's one thing I'm concerned about.
Yeah, you have to be using a phone to send your info to it as well. So that's part of the deal. But presumably British Airways gives you the tag. Right.
I think that'll just help people like me who lose track of things way too easily, especially luggage. I've lost it way too many times. I'm all for that. As long as there's no extra cost involved, I'm totally cool with it.
But aren't the bag tags themselves still they're getting attached to your luggage, and if they're lost, that's a more expensive loss than just a
I'm worried about the display getting broken, or there being a glitch where it just doesn't show anything anymore suddenly.
You see the way that they handle those bags. Well, nobody's being very gentle.
Have you ever tried to pair like a Bluetooth headset to your phone or anything like that? It doesn't really work very easily, even though it's gotten a lot better. Could you imagine the delays that would be caused because you couldn't get the stupid tag on properly, or the data isn't being transferred, or your carrier isn't supported, you don't have Wi-Fi?
You got multiple flights. And it says JFK, and then you get to JFK, and it's supposed to flip to BLT, and it doesn't. And all of a sudden, your bag is like, well, it's at JFK. I don't know where it's supposed to go now.
Yeah, I don't like this idea at all.
This is not the part where you want intelligence. You want GPS in there, but you don't want e-ink.
You can't argue with paper.
Keep your nose out of my flights, Tech. I need to get
Paper
there.
can rip, and actually, it's pretty. They don't use paper; they use some pretty solid stuff now. So yeah.
I like the souvenirs of all the tags. I don't know. Maybe I'm just.
I'm
sentimental.
usually for this kind of thing. You keep that stuff. You're a hoarder.
Well, I leave it on the bag. I don't really like keep
No,
it.
they take it off now. Every time you get on a new flight,
I
they're
guess I
like,
don't travel much.
He's just lazy.
All right.
You're right. Thank you, Steve.
Let's move on to the calendar.
BlackBerry has an earnings report tomorrow, June 28th. Also tomorrow, Nintendo of America is retiring a few of the Wii online services like the News Channel, the Everybody Votes Channel, the Forecast Channel, the Check Me with 2 eyes out channel, the Wii message board and data exchange between friends are also being retired. NVIDIA Shield has been delayed for a mechanical issue. The launch is pushed back to July. We don't have a specific date yet. Rovio's Angry Birds trilogy is going on to the Nintendo Wii and Wii U starting on August 13th. I know you guys are excited about that. Google will remove all blogger sites that monetize adult content by June 30th. So by the end of this weekend, no more making money off of the boobies. And Aereo is coming to Chicago on September 13th.
Unless it's art, I guess.
Yeah,
something.
right. Tasteful.
Yeah. Let's see what's incoming.
Incoming message.
I'm very excited that James, a.k.a. Accuzad, agreed to send us some video reports. He's attending the Microsoft Build Conference, and he's got a report about what he saw on the show floor. Take it away, James.
Greetings, this is James Jeffries. I play Accuzad on the internet. I'm here in town for the Microsoft Build Conference and wanted to mention something I saw that really stood out on day one. Now, Steve Ballmer mentioned during his keynote the ability for Windows 8.1 to print natively to a 3D printer, but it's amazing to see how many 3D printers they've got here at the show. Walking around the showroom floor, you couldn't throw a free Windows 8 tablet without hitting a 3D printer, spitting out some sort of plastic doodad or knickknack or gizmo. They're totally fascinating, but it makes me wonder, is this really a thing? Are we all going to have 3D printers in the future, or are these going to go the way that 3D TVs went? Thanks. Keep up the great show.
Awesome. By the way, look at the editing work. You can tell James is a broadcast professional there, actually. So that we didn't pay him or anything. He just wanted to do that. He volunteered. So thank you, James, for that. That's pretty awesome. Good question, though. I think 3D printers are the wave of the future. I think it's entirely different than 3D televisions.
3D television it's like, oh, look, sometimes content is sort of cool in 3D. A 3D printer is actually printing out things that did not exist before. And it could be anything. You know, the possibilities are limitless.
I think 3D printers would be like photo printers. Like some people will buy them. It's not going to be like a printer that everyone has to have. Like you have to have one that's black and white so you can print things out. But 3D printers will be for enthusiasts. And I was just looking at that. It looked like somebody was 3D printing a coaster. So that's magnificent. I can't wait to 3D print a coaster.
I'm in.
I'm in. I like coasters.
Print the future. Yeah.
We got a message from Anders in Sweden. It says, just a comment on the cardboard bike story in episode 782, sturdiness, waterproofness, etc. When I was in the military, we were issued basic cardboard latrines. Just a box of a convenient size to sit on with a hole on top, built of that sturdy kind of cardboard with a bag inside. They were specified to seat a man of 100 kilos and to be outdoor proof. They did hold a man of 100 kilos on the first day. Dramatic pause. After a damp night, they did not. But perhaps free enterprise cardboard is better than the government issue.
I hope so. Yeah, that's disturbing. Thank you, Anders, for that. Appreciate the emails. Thanks, everybody, for watching and listening. Great to have you, Steve. Steve Kovac, Business Insider, along with us. Let them know where they can follow you online, where they can find your reports and all that good stuff.
Sure. Twitter, it's at Steve Kovac, K-O-V-A-C-H. And then online, businessinsider.com/SAI. That's the tech section.
Thank you, Steve. And don't forget about our subreddit, technewstoday.reddit.com. Place to go to let us know what show stories you'd like us to talk about. You can vote them up. You can vote them down. You can submit your own. It's like a wonderland of tech news. Go try it out, technewstoday.reddit.com. You can find us on the web at twit.tv/TNT. Email us, TNT@twit.tv, or give us a call and leave us a voicemail, 260-TNT-SHOW. Darren Kitchen will be back tomorrow, along with Len Peralta. We're keeping our fingers crossed to illustrate the show tomorrow. We'll see you then.